Grant Thornton, they've just released a study saying that the UAE offers the 7th best financing environment in the world for growing businesses, trailing only Singapore, Canada, Chile, Slovenia and Poland and Finland. Well, with us to discuss this list and more is Danny McLaughlin. He is the partner of Grant Thornton UAE. So thanks for joining us today, Danny.
Good morning.
So let's talk us through the Grant Thornton Global Dynamism Index. What is it exactly?
Well, it's an index which refers to changes in the economy that are likely to lead to a faster future rate of growth. And so the firm has polled business leaders, C-suite executives in a number of countries, 60 countries, over 4,000 people interviewed, just to get their opinions on a range of dynamic business factors such as labour, financing and so on, technology, just to get a feel for how is their country performing, is it a good place to do business, does it encourage business growth?
And in terms of the UAE, it scored pretty well, as we were saying there, on the list. So why has it's jumped 10 places, I believe, since last year?
Yeah, well, I think that must reflect a growth in the economy, growing business confidence, and clearly the government's support for SME businesses as well. That's an area that is so important here in the UAE. It represents about 95% of the economy. It provides about 40% of the jobs here in the UAE. So government is encouraging growth and business and banks to finance SMEs.
But what does that 7th place ranking really mean? And what does the category really mean?
Well, the category is all about sources of finance, about regulatory issues, about the ability of companies to gain access to finance. And so what the comparison is with the other countries is it a good place to do business? Are the banks, for example, here more likely to lend? Clearly, we've seen situations across the world where banks have tightened up financing. There is a degree of risk aversion, of course, but here there is overall support for lending, and really the aim to encourage SME businesses in particular, which represents such an important part of the economy.
Yes, I wanted to come to that, Danny,
Yes.
to ask within the study if there was a difference, because I'm sure many people are listening that run SMEs and saying, yeah, we would love better access to financing, but it's not happening. So how does the balance with the report go between SMEs and bigger corporates that are well known that probably do get easier access?
Absolutely. I think if you're a large corporate with an established track record, finance is clearly much easier to do. If you're a smaller business, the important things are to be able to convince the banks and other lenders that you have a model that potentially works, that you have a good business plan. And I think a challenge for many smaller businesses, the entrepreneur concerned may well be excellent at their particular chosen trade, whether it's fashion or engineering, but do they have good business skills? That's something that we're trying to encourage in Grant Thornton by working with Gulf Capital on their SME awards, and we will be running workshops, for example, to encourage those smaller SMEs that are nominated and participants in that competition to enhance their skills.
Well, the financing environment ranking was only one of the categories. Labour and human capital, science and technology, business operating environment, economics and growth. How do we do in those other categories?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the UAE could see some improvements in some of those categories. Human capital, for example, is one of the lower performing scores. I think that reflects the challenges of finding of recruiting here in the Gulf. The whole environment with visas and sponsorship sometimes can make it difficult to retain employees. And I think it certainly affects entrepreneurial activity because, it's harder to be a freelancer here in the Gulf, for example. And so people who have a great business idea find it more difficult to establish their own business.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we do pride ourselves, I think, on having a fairly good depth of a talent pool here in the UAE. But you're right, in terms of actually movement of labour and, the freelancers as sort of add up labour, it is a bit more difficult, isn't it? What about the science and technology area? I mean, it's easy to see perhaps why we don't score well in there.
Well, one of the things that was interesting for me looking at the report was that, for example, broadband penetration here in the UAE is about a third of that in the UK. Now, if you're a small growing business, you really do need to have fast access to the net, high bandwidth and so on if you're running any business that's got a technology sort of angle, and that's most businesses today. So I think broadband penetration, there is a duopoly with the two major providers, and perhaps some liberalisation there would be good.
And Daniel, we're just getting a nice reaction to the comments that you're making. And somebody's saying, how is the index relevant in the UAE to smaller businesses, i.e. what is Grant Thornton doing to support them?
Well, as I say earlier on, we are working with the Gulf Capital to run these awards, and a number of companies have been nominated for the awards that take place in November. And this is designed to encourage companies to raise their profile, to showcase their talent, to actually get on the stage and to demonstrate how well they're performing. As I say, we support smaller businesses. We, for example, go and talk to graduates in universities. We want people to come and consider doing stints with us, working with us in the firm, and just trying to get people to think you can be successful, you can be your own boss, and to empower them to do that.
Well, we've talked through these categories. The seventh place in the financial environment ranking, not so well in the labour and human capital. Science and technology, not so good. Obviously, we don't do a lot of R&D here. The business operating environment and economics and growth, I imagine we scored pretty well in.
Well, I think so. I mean, clearly the free zone model is one that really is excellent, and that's encouraged lots of businesses to come to the UAE. If you're thinking about a place to locate your new business, the UAE offers many advantages. Now, for people who come here as tourists, they see the Burj Khalifa and they go downtown. But, I like to wander around places like Jafsa and the various free zones, and the amount of industry, the small one warehouse industries and businesses that are there, many of our clients are in that sector, is phenomenal. The amount of trade that goes on, this central hub really encourages people to come here, to establish businesses, to continue the long trading history that Dubai has got.
So for Dubai to move another few steps forward, as we say, it's already leapt 10 places. Where do you think they need to concentrate their efforts?
Well, I think one clear thing is that the bankruptcy law, for example, is definitely, I believe, a bit of a potential problem and something that may deter people about being innovators and entrepreneurs, because the consequences of failure, and businesses do fail, can be that one finds oneself before the criminal court. So I think a reform of the bankruptcy laws is something that's important. The banks and others are pressing for that. That's a key aspect that perhaps needs to be reformed, and I know that's in discussion at the moment.
Was there an overall ranking when you add up all the different categories?
There is an overall ranking.
Where were we?
I think we're probably hanging around about the middle of that.
So where were we in numbers?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that one.
So how many countries were...
there were 60 countries in total.
So we were around, what, 30, something like that?
Probably around about 30, that's correct.
And where would you like to see us up to next year?
I would hope that we're pushing up in the 20s, if not higher. And I think that with the growing strengthening of the economy here, there's no reason why Dubai shouldn't get there.
It's interesting, really, the sort of, I suppose, subjectivity to a certain degree that goes into these studies, because we had earlier on the show Ericsson with their Connected Cities Index.
Yes.
And we did very well as Dubai for connectivity and for being a put-together city. And yet you're saying that the broadband penetration here is a third of the UK, and you don't rate it very highly.
Well, the answer to that, I think, is that if you're in business and you're perhaps in one of the centres like TCOM and so on, then you really do have high levels of very high-speed connectivity. But, for the small entrepreneur who may be working in a villa in Jumeirah or somewhere else, perhaps the speeds that they're getting are not so good. Maybe they don't have the ability to access the high-speed landline broadband links that you would need to encourage your business to be successful. So I think it's about having an overall access, maybe people further out of the city as well. But
I guess by this time next year, possibly the rollout of fibre optic may have changed that picture.
Definitely.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on financing again, because Tolga's just sent in a text, and he's saying, going back to the financing issue, saying that with SMEs, it's the rate of lending. They have to have their 3 years of accounts. Yes, as an auditor. 25% reducing to 14% and 11% for a company operating for 3 years. He said by the time you've used all that investment for that part of the equation, it is holding back and sacrificing your profit margin and therefore your company.
Yeah.
So it's still very difficult for these SMEs to start off and access that capital to move from a one-man band, should we say, to the next level.
Undoubtedly, and I know that many small businesses, particularly that are Emirati run, are very reliant on family for sources of funds, and many of those are supported by their family as their primary source of funding. And cash flow is a real big issue here. Getting paid, chasing debts, all these business skills that ensure that your business will survive. You may be very good at what you do, but it's the underlying business management is key to success and key to attracting further funding and support. But within the Emirates, there are many initiatives by the government to actually support SMEs too. The Department of Economic Development here in Dubai, the Mohammed bin Rashid Establishment Fund as well, are all potential sources of access and advice, and we encourage people to pursue those.
Okay, Danny, well, thank you very much for joining us
You're
today.
welcome.
Danny McLaughlin there. He is the partner of Grant Thornton UAE.
Thank you. Bye-bye.